Join our community by subscribing. Every click helps us share more stories like this one. The introduction. The evening air in the small town of Maplewood felt thick, as if it had conspired against the tranquil facade of the community. As the sun dipped below the tree line, shadows crept across the quiet streets, lending an uneasy silence that settled over the homes. White picket fences framed yards where children once played. Now they simply stood as remnants of innocence. On the corner of Oak and Main, the local diner, Maggie's Place, began to dim its fluorescent lights. It would be a while before the regulars arrived for late-night coffee and pie. But one patron sat alone. A man in his late 30s stirred his cold, untouched mug, lost in thought. His name was Mark Raines, a private investigator who had grown accustomed to the gnawing feeling of unresolved case. The months had stretched on without substantial work, and the prospect of a long, uneventful winter loomed over him. But that evening, as the clock struck 8, the door swung open, and a figure stood silhouetted in the doorway. It was Sarah Delaney, a local journalist armed with a notepad and a tenacious appetite for truth. She stepped forward, her eyes as sharp as the breeze that followed her in. "Mark, I need your help," she said, voice trembling but resolute. A sense of foreboding washed over the diner, mingling with the aromas of stale coffee and frying bacon. This was no simple inquiry. Sarah's voice carried the weight of something sinister. "It's about a missing person," she continued, and as the words dropped like stones into the still waters of Mark's mind, he began to wonder how deep the ripples would reach. The victim. The mention of a missing person ignited a spark in Mark's chest. He pushed his half-full mug aside, focusing intently on Sarah. "Who's missing?" The question came out flat, but urgency tightened in his throat as he studied her expression. "Lila Hawthorne," she answered, pulling a photograph from her coat pocket. It fluttered slightly in the draft as she placed it on the table. In it, a young woman smiled, her long hair caught in a gentle breeze. Bright blue eyes glimmered with life, a stark contrast to the grim news Sarah had just delivered. She was last seen 10 days ago, walking home from the library. No one seems to know what happened after that. Mark felt a familiar knot twist in his gut. Lila was the kind of person one didn't expect to simply vanish. The town's optimism depended on her, as fragile as it seemed. What did the police say? Sarah's lips pressed into a thin line. They're treating it as a runaway case. But she hesitated, glancing around the empty diner as if the shadows might be listening. She wouldn't leave. Not like this. She had everything planned out: school, a job offer out of state, and she was going to visit her sick grandmother. A silence hovered between them, broken only by the distant sound of a siren. Mark leaned back, piecing the fragments together. "So what's the plan?" he asked, sensing the gravity behind Sarah's determination. "I think someone knows more than they're letting on," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "And I need your help to find the truth before it's too late." Mark felt the weight of those words drape over him, forging an indelible connection to a story that demanded to be told. The crime scene. The morning sun hesitantly broke over Maplewood, casting long sighs of golden light through the trees. The park was once a popular gathering spot, now hauntingly empty, its trails lined with leaves that crunched beneath their footsteps. The anticipation in the air felt electric, hanging heavy between them. "Over here," Sarah called, breaking the stillness as she pointed to a section of the pathway that veered into the trees. The ground was uneven, punctuated by old roots and underbrush that threatened to reclaim the worn trail. As they stepped off the main path, Mark surveyed the area, absorbing every detail. The rustle of leaves, the faint scuffle of a squirrel, and the growing unease gnawing at his mind. Footprints disturbed the layers of dried leaves, mere impressions bearing witness to a struggle. Mark crouched down, tracing the outline with his finger, feeling the chill of something sinister beneath the surface. "Recent," he muttered, the evidence dark against the crisp fall day. "Looks like she was dragged this way." His stomach sank as Sarah pulled out her camera, snapping photos with swift professionalism. "We should call this in," she suggested, looking equally troubled and focused. As she documented the scene, a sense of urgency clawed at Mark. They were already treading into dangerous territory, and he couldn't shake the feeling that time was slipping away. "Let's check further in," he urged, glancing over his shoulder, the trees looming like sentinels guarding secrets. They pressed forward, moving deeper into the park's thicket. Branches scratched at their arms as they ducked and weaved, and the dappled light filtered through the canopy, offering brief moments of clarity. But as they rounded a bend, the sight before them stopped them. Cold a knotted vine entwined around a discarded backpack, its fabric stained and blemished, whispering of a life interrupted. Mark's heart raced. This was more than just remnants of a girl's forgotten items. It was a harrowing testament to something far darker lurking beneath the surface of their idyllic town. The early investigation. Back at the diner, the atmosphere buzzed with an unsettling energy. Mark sat across from Sarah, who was rifling through her notice each page, an urgent testament to her relentless pursuit for details on Lila's disappearance. The scent of brewed coffee hung in the air, though neither had a taste for it now. "We need to interview her friends," Mark suggested, tapping his fingers against the table. "They might know something or remember odd behaviors, anything that seemed off in the days leading to her disappearance." Sarah nodded, resolve hardening her features. "I already reached out to a few. A couple of them are willing to meet today. I have a lead on Lila's best friend, Jenna, at the coffee shop on 3rd. We should hurry." They left the diner, making their way past the quaint storefronts of Maplewood. The town bustled with the echo of normalcy, families living their lives, oblivious to the dread that loomed like a storm cloud over Mark and Sarah. As they approached the coffee shop, Mark felt a chill run down his spine. Two worlds collided here. The warmth of community warmed the air, but felt suffocating against the cold reality of Lila's absence. Jenna sat alone at a corner table, her hands wrapped tightly around a steaming cup. Her eyes were red and tired, reflective of sleepless nights filled with worry. Approaching her cautiously, Mark introduced himself. "I'm Mark Rains, and this is Sarah Delaney. We're looking into Lila's disappearance." Jenna's gaze shifted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I just don't understand." She was so focused on her future, she wouldn't just vanish. Tears glistened, and she hurriedly wiped them away. "That seems strange. Quiet. Like she was hiding something." Mark leaned in, sensing a fracture in Lila's carefully constructed world. A person she was worried about? Jenna hesitated, biting her lip. There was this guy, Tyler. I thought they were just friends, but she seemed uncomfortable around him lately. She didn't want to talk about it. The name hung heavily in the air, and Mark exchanged a glance with Sarah. Their instincts were aligned. As Jenna continued to offer fragmented details, a web of connections began to weave together, a picture starting to emerge. With each piece, the urgency deepened. They needed to locate Tyler, and fast. Time was not on their side. The dead ends. The afternoon sun cast long shadows as Mark and Sarah stood outside a dilapidated house on the outskirts of town. Tyler's last known address loomed before them, a worn-out structure seemingly out of place amidst the otherwise quaint neighborhood. The peeling paint and unkempt yard felt like tangible echoes of neglect, resonating with the silence they now faced. "Are you sure this is the right place?" Sarah whispered, her voice layered with doubt as she adjusted her camera strap, ready to document anything that might unfold. Mark nodded, though his confidence wavered. "It's the only lead we have. Jenna said he lives here, and she mentioned he was home a lot recently. We have to at least try." Taking a breath, they approached the front porch, noting the broken steps and the faint scent of mildew wafting through the air. Mark knocked, the sound echoing hollowly. After several moments, the door creaked open, revealing a sullen young man with disheveled hair and dark circles under his eyes. His expression morphed from surprise to guarded suspicion. "Can I help you?" Tyler asked, his voice apprehensive. "Hi." Tyler, Mark said, forcing a friendly tone. "We're looking into Lila Hawthorne's disappearance. Do you mind if we ask you a few questions?" The young man's eyes flickered for a moment, as if weighing his options. Then he shrugged. "I haven't seen her. We're not really friends anymore." Mark exchanged a glance with Sarah, reading the trepidation in Tyler's demeanor. Something felt off. "Jenna mentioned you two were close. Did something happen?" Tyler shifted uncomfortably, looking past them as if the answers he needed might be found in the scattered leaves. "I don't know. She just started avoiding me. I didn't think it was a big deal." As they pressed him for details, the answers began to dry up. Tyler's vague responses dissolved into a series of excuses and half-truths, all while avoiding direct eye contact. With each question, the distance between them widened, and a wall of defensiveness rose around him. Mark felt frustration prick at the edges of his mind. With no tangible leads emerging from Tyler, they had no choice but to retreat. As they stepped off the porch, disappointment settled in. Each dead end felt like a weight pressing down closer to despair. "We're running out of time," Sarah murmured, her earlier determination waning. As they drove away, unease crept over Mark like fog rolling in from the coast. Maplewood felt smaller against their growing sense of urgency, and he couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. Shadows whispering secrets they still needed to uncover. The broken pieces of Lila's story seemed further out of reach than ever. A break in the case. The fading daylight cast a sepia tone over Maplewood as Mark and Sarah reconvened at the diner, tension coiling between them. Sarah flipped through her notes, her brow furrowed in concentration. "We checked all the wrong places," she admitted, frustration lacing her voice. "Tyler's not talking, and it's like Lila simply vanished into thin air." Mark rubbed the back of his neck, his mind racing. In a town this small, someone... He took a moment to reset his focus, glancing around the diner, where life buzzed on obliviously. Then a thought struck him. What about her social media? Did she have any unusual posts in the days leading up to her disappearance? Good idea, Sarah replied, her eyes lighting up with renewed determination. I'll dive into her accounts again when we get back. As they worked through their plates of greasy diner food, Mark felt an urgency gathering a crack, and the case was beginning to form. They finished quickly and jumped into the car, the cool evening air stinging their skin as they sped towards the Hawthorne home. Once inside, Sarah pulled out her laptop, typing furiously while Mark rifled through any personal items he could find: photos, books, scraps left behind, looking for anything that might provide insight into Lila's state of mind. After a few tense moments, Sarah let out an exclamation. "Mark, look at this!" On the screen, a series of posts popped up, documenting Lila's recent life with haunting clarity. Her last few posts look at the timestamps. The last one was about a week ago, but comments below suggest she was getting direct messages from someone. Mark leaned closer, his heart racing as Sarah clicked on the mentions. Screenshots of messages surfaced, and one stood out, a username filled with exclamation marks and emoticons, teasing Lila about her plans. "Could be Tyler?" he asked, unease creeping back. Sarah scrolled further, revealing another unsettling message. "I know what you did." The chilling implication reverberated in the air around them. This person knew something that made Lila uncomfortable enough to cut ties. Mark straightened, determination fueling his heartbeat. Their investigation wasn't finished. It was only the beginning. As they exchanged glances, understanding passed between them, a mutual unspoken vow to help Lila, to peel back layers of fear and doubt threatening to bury the truth. "This is it," Mark said, conviction solidifying within him. "We have to track down this person, whoever they are. They're the next piece of the puzzle." As they dove deeper into the online rabbit hole, hope flickered anew, igniting their resolve to uncover the darkness lurking in their own backyard. The suspect. The air felt thick with anticipation as Mark and Sarah sat side by side, combing through the digital breadcrumbs left by the enigmatic social media user. The username mystery fanatic clung to their thoughts, as if it had a life of its own. Their breakthrough was illuminating, but it also darkened the path ahead. "I managed to trace the account's IP address to a nearby town," Sarah said, her fingers flying over the keyboard. "It's linked to a guy named Alex Green. He reportedly has a history of questionable behavior online." Mark felt a cold spike of apprehension. "History? A few restraining orders for harassment," she replied, glancing up from her laptop. The sunlight slipping through the window highlighted the intensity in her eyes. "He's been known to fixate on local girls, especially those he thinks are out of reach." A knot tightened in Mark's stomach. This was the kind of individual who thrived on obsession, dangerous, unpredictable. They agreed there was no time to waste, and late evening blues cast a heavy shadow over their mission as they set their sights on locating Alex. Navigating through the winding back roads, Mark's thoughts were consumed with images of Lila, her bright smile, forever lingering in photographs now blurred by the potential darkness around. They pulled up outside a modest house, a worn-out pickup parked haphazardly on the lawn. Overgrown weeds crowded around the property, seeming to reflect the untamed presence of its owner within. Mark motioned for Sarah to stay cautious as they approached the door. He knocked firmly, and they stood in tense silence, waiting for a reaction. Moments passed, stretching painfully long, until finally, the door creaked open to reveal Alex. Dressed in a faded band t-shirt and dark jeans, he appeared disheveled and withdrawn, eyes darting with impatience before they settled on the two of them. "What do you want?" he snapped, the hostility palpable. Mark took a deep breath, grounding himself. "We're looking for Lila Hawthorne," he stated, trying to keep his tone even. "We believe you might know something about her disappearance." Immediate panic flickered across Alex's face, revealing a fracture in his carefully constructed facade. "Why would I know anything? Just go away," he growled, slamming the door shut. Without a thought, Mark put his foot in the way, forcing it open again. "We're not leaving until we talk," he insisted, the urgency swelling in his chest. Alex's demeanor shifted to one of indignation, but Mark noticed the cracks, the sweat beading on his forehead, the way he clenched his fists. Something primal ignited within Mark, spurring him on as he stepped further into the dimly lit house. It was a confrontation that felt both necessary and dangerous, his instinct screaming that Alex held the keys to answers that could unlock Lila's fate. "Did you do something to her?" Mark demanded, his voice thundering with raw conviction. The air lay heavy with tension, fraught with fear and desperation hanging in the balance. The trial. Weeks had passed since Mark and Sarah confronted Alex Green, but the shadow of Lila's disappearance still loomed heavily over the town. Despite the initial unease, their efforts had borne fruit. Police investigation led to the arrest of Alex based on the mounting evidence against him, culminating in a trial that captured the community's rapt attention. Mark found himself in the courtroom, the air thick with tension and the sting of uncertainty. Rows of chairs filled with familiar faces, friends, family, and strangers, all bound together by a common thread of concern for Lila. As the gavel struck, silencing the murmurs, the proceedings began amidst a suffocating silence. The prosecutor stood tall, methodical in his approach, outlining the case against Alex with clarity and conviction. Mark watched intently as they presented evidence. The messages from Mystery Fanatic, the testimony from Jenner revealing Lila's discomfort, and the chilling remnants of the digital trail leading directly to Alex's door. But as the defense took the floor, the atmosphere shifted. Alex's attorney wove a narrative of doubt, painting a picture of a misguided young man who had been wrongfully accused. "Boys will be boys," she argued, attempting to charm the jury with an air of innocence, delivering a personal history of Alex that, despite its flaws, invoked a sliver of sympathy. Mark felt the sting of anger rise in his throat. Doubt began to ripple through the room like a receding tide. He traded glances with Sarah, who had followed every word with an intensity that rivaled his own. They had poured their souls into this case, every late-night conversation, every lead chased down. Every moment when fear begged them to stop. As witnesses spoke, a palpable sense of dread seeped into Mark's heart. The truth felt murky, tangled in narratives spun by fear and desperation. Even the evidence, damning as it seemed, was contingent on perception. And the defense was relentless. When it was Mark's turn to testify, his hands trembled slightly as he faced the jury. He recounted his investigation, detailing the discovery of Lila's backpack and the follow-up that led them to Alex. Each word poured forth, tinged with an urgency bred from needing justice. Lila was a caring person, he testified, desperately framing her story. She had dreams, a future. This wasn't just about a young girl missing. This was about her life being stolen. As he stepped down, Mark felt the eyes of the jury on him, some compassionate, some skeptical. The sense of inevitability was suffocating, yet he clung to hope. In the closing statements, the prosecutor succinctly framed the central narrative. Lila deserves justice. Not just for herself, but for every person who loves her. The jury deliberated, the weight of their responsibility heavy on. Finally, a verdict emerged, a decision that would either bring closure or deepen the pain. As they announced guilty, a wave of relief swept through the courtroom, mixed with the bitterness of a tragedy that could never be undone. Yet beneath the surface, the journey was far from over. Lila's voice, once lost in the shadows, began to resonate. And for Mark, it had become an unspoken promise. He would continue to fight for those who couldn't fight for themselves. As the gavel struck once more, signaling closure for this chapter, he knew the echoes of Lila's story would linger, urging him to seek out the truth no matter the cost. The aftermath. The weeks following the trial were a bittersweet haze for Mark and Sarah. Maplewood was a town forever changed, the weight of grief mingling with the sense of relief that justice had prevailed. Yet the emptiness left by Lila's absence was palpable, looming over the community like an unwelcoming shroud. Marks often found himself at the diner, sitting in the booth where everything had ignited. The bright lights felt dimmer now, and laughter echoed like a haunting melody in the background. Sarah joined him, her expression a mix of determination and sorrow. The conversation flowed less freely than before, a palpable disturbance hovering in the air as they grappled with the enormity of it all. "Have you talked to Jenna since the trial?" Sarah ventured, stirring her coffee, absent-minded. Mark shook his head. "No. I think she needs space. Lila's loss hit her hard." He paused, remembering the pain in Jenna's eyes, still raw despite court proceedings resolving into a verdict. "I just want to make sure she has support." "Me too," Sarah said softly. "This has shaken us all. I thought we'd gained some closure after the trial, but it feels like we're still searching." That night, Mark found himself standing alone on Lila Street. He glanced up at the house, their gatherings there, the laughter, the plans for futures that would never be. The pang of loss surged within him as he silently vowed to honor her memory. Days turned into weeks, and while the town tried to move on, Mark was restless. He pored over Lila's case files, searching for any missed detail, any voice that might need to be heard. The trial had been a battle, but the war against obscured truths felt ongoing. One evening, while thumbing through police reports, he stumbled upon an overlooked detail on of Lila's friends had mentioned an argument after a party weeks before her disappearance. It had been dismissed amidst the frenzy, but now it felt like a light flickering in the darkness. Fueled by urgency, Mark contacted Sarah, proposing they dig deeper into Lila's social circle, revisiting those conversations that may have fallen victim to the noise of grief and courtroom drama. What if there's something more? Another piece of the puzzle, he urged, adrenaline coursing through him. We can't let Lila's story end here. Sarah's eyes sparked with renewed determination. Let's do it. We owe it to her to leave no stone unturned. With that, they began reaching out, reconnecting with friends and acquaintances, tracing Lila's final days, and signaling that her memory mattered. As they worked through the connections, the ripples began to widen. Months later, at a small gathering in Lila's honor, the town came together to remember her. The laughter and stories that once filled spaces now celebrated a life cut short, but still loved and cherished. The grief had begun to settle, but it also sparked a fire within Mark and Sarah's commitment to ensure that no one else would face the same destiny as Lila, that the darkness would not consume the light. The aftermath of Lila's disappearance had morphed Mark into something new, a protector of truths, a seeker of justice, and, as he stood beneath the stars that night, he felt Lila with him, her spirit igniting the mission that lay ahead. Reflection. Mark often found solace in the quiet moments that followed such a tumultuous journey. Sitting on the porch of his small home, he gazed out into the vastness of the darkened sky, stars twinkling like distant echoes of forgotten promises. The weight of Lila's case settled around him, a heavy yet comforting cloak reminding him of the lives that intersected through fear, loss, and resolution. Months had passed since the trial, and the anger he felt had begun to morph into something productive. He engaged more with community services, advocating for better support systems for those gone missing and empowering families drowning in uncertainty. He had become a voice for the voiceless, echoing Lila's story far beyond their small town. And yet, the reflection in the night sky reminded him of the fragility of life. The lives burned bright, despite the darkness that threatened to befall. Lila's smile flickered through his memory, igniting a passion for truth beyond the justice he had found. Each life, each person woven into the fabric of the investigation mattered, and their stories deserved to be told fully. As the night deepened, he remembered his vow to ensure no one else fell through the cracks of indifference, to continue the journey born from tragedy as both a reminder and a rallying cry. Lila's spirit resonated in his chest, a beacon urging him onward, compelling him to seek justice not just for her, but for countless others who became lost in the shadows. After all, Lila was more than a case number or a headline. She had been a daughter, a friend, a dreamer, and through Mark's resolve, her light would continue to shine.